I'm Christian.
And I'm Theo. I'm a physical therapist.
Today, we're going to talk about stabilization versus mobility for specific joints. I know a lot of us are doing body work at home, trying to work on mobility and fix some of our lingering issues, as you know, a lot of us are athletes or have to do a lot of working out for our job. Theo, what can you tell us about what joints should be stable and what joints should be mobile?
Yeah, so that's kind of why we lift. It's what it all comes down to is you're trying to protect the joint. You know, you're protecting the resiliency of the joint so that they can move, they can support our bodies in space as we progress through life. So a lot of issues I'll see typically, somebody comes in and they're chasing tightness. They're reporting, the hamstrings are tight. Or
always chasing tightness.
Always chasing tightness. So so a lot of complaints we'll hear are, my hamstrings are tight or my low back is tight. And I've been trying to stretch it. I've had it massaged. It just doesn't seem to be loosening up. And my immediate response would be, okay, well, maybe let's stop all that together and take a deeper look, because it's usually not a tight issue at that point. It could be a stability issue. So if those areas that should be stable are moving too much, the body's defense mechanism is to just sort of tighten everything up. And that's what we end up seeing quite a bit. Most of us can typically do a few tests and tell right away, okay, maybe I need to stretch more, or maybe I need to wrap a couple mini bands around and walk around those all day and just stiffen things up. One little test that you could do, it involves just locking your elbow. So if you straighten your arms out and your elbow starts to drop down, like if it doesn't stop at zero, it actually goes a little further. You can tuck your thumb. If you tuck your thumb and actually can touch your thumb to your wrist. The third test is just legs locked, trying to reach your palms down and touch the floor. If any of those are positive, that's a pretty good sign that you actually have a little bit more laxity in your ligaments. Okay, so if that individual was coming to me saying that they're having shoulder pain with snatching or doing kipping pull-ups, I'd probably tell them that's the last thing they need to be doing, because they don't have the stability to control that extra movement that they're putting their body into. They're loading an unstable joint. Okay, so we see a lot of injuries that occur from that. The body is built on joints that are either stable or mobile, and they're just stacked on top of each other. And the lower back is probably the first thing that kind of rings to me. Is it's a stable joint. It's your spine, and you have a little bit of rotation, but you really should not be moving a ton through your lumbar if you have it in your hip or if you have it in your upper back. So if your upper back moves well, most of us it doesn't. Whether you're sitting, wearing gear, those things start to compress the lower back but restricts the upper back from moving. Your lower back's going to start to move more to make up for that, and then eventually it's going to feel tight. So that tightness isn't necessarily the low back, it's actually the upper back not moving the way it should. So we have to really be careful with how we start self-treating some of these conditions, because if you're chasing something that you think is actually a tightness and you're causing more instability, that can lead to a more serious injury.
You just said it, there are joints that are stable and mobile, and they're stacked on one another. And is it kind of in a sense of either or? Like ankle is supposed to be mobile, knee is supposed to be stable, or vice versa, and just kind of working up the chain? How does that look, and which are which?
So the ankle, it's a perfect example. The ankle should be stable, so you don't actually completely roll that thing when you pivot or maybe miss a step. But there is a flexibility component that allows in the foot that allows the ankle to manipulate different surfaces, so we're not just walking rigid all the time. I think when you look at a ball and socket joint, so like the shoulder and the hip, yeah, you absolutely need the stability. It's a very mobile joint, but what ends up happening is we just don't have the awareness or the control to go from, as we age and things just generally stiffen up. If you introduce an activity like throwing or getting back into the weekend warrior of softball, football, whatever, or even just activities in the weight room, maybe flinging certain weight overhead, if you don't have that control first, you can lose control very quickly. So ball and socket joints have a component of both, but you really have to be able to control the stability first before you would start to branch out and just send a joint into kind of free range of motion that doesn't know how to control. So yeah, the foot communicates with the ankle quite a bit, and it can get pretty complex, and sometimes it's overwhelming even just trying to evaluate. So in simplicity, just try to think of like a very flexible joint such as the shoulder should not just be thrown into a heavy overhead snatch, like a dead hang pull up. These movements where you're essentially using momentum to work through a movement. You always want to maintain good control, from the scapula to the shoulder, and doing the cuff work, some basic isolated, rotation type work will be enough to feed that. Just be careful if you do notice something maybe in the trap, like you're chasing tightness in the upper trap and it just doesn't seem to go away, and it seems to show up with specific movements or activities. it's probably not a stiff upper trap. It's probably the muscle compensating because the cuff is weak.
So instead of thinking about joints as requiring a lot of mobility or a lot of stability, there's really a component of each in every joint.
Yeah, certain joints will be predominantly more stable than mobile, but say in the hip, you do have both. You do need both, and it really just depends on the activity. I think typically the person that locks their joints, so they arch their back at the top of a deadlift, or they're real wide in their push-up position, or they're creating these locked out positions. That person to me is somebody that's probably unstable. They're using the joint to try and protect themselves as they move through the movement. And yeah, you could get away with it for a certain amount of time, but eventually you could actually cause a serious injury.
Something that I'm hearing you say a little bit, and I feel like this personally a lot, is when I am lifting really, really heavy weights, I feel really good and stable and I don't feel pain. But if I pull back a little bit and I start trying to be conservative with myself and use lighter loads and, maybe reel back on the intensity, my body starts to hurt a lot more. It's starting to make me wonder if maybe I can't stop.
Won't stop.
It's starting to make me wonder that, if I stop, if I'm ever going to be able to get back to it again.
So when you add weight, so compression, lifting heavy and being comfortable in a heavy position, I'd want to see, is that range different? Maybe you are in a nice compact range of motion that you feel comfortable with, but when you're lighter, you're going into maybe a little bit of a different position. And, if the hip's stiff or if the ankle's stiff, and you're going a little bit further into those joints that, are uncomfortable with that. The range will change dramatically as the weight goes up.
I mean, that makes sense to me. Every time that I have injured myself, it has been with submaximal weight. It's been with something that I feel like I should just be able to blow past, but I've never hurt myself in a PR attempt or anything like that.
It's because it's like your mental capacity. It's like that mindfulness. You're ready for it. You know what you're thinking of. It's that weight. Like there's your goal right in front of you. So everything is focused on that goal. I think that goes along with burpees and things like body weight movements, because you'll see form just go way out the window because you're just moving through the movement thinking, oh, it's just body weight, I'm okay. And see a lot of knee injuries, see a lot of shoulder injuries because this person's just maybe rolling through these movements and they don't think form really matters because the weight is so light. Or say the person who has perfect form on 500-pound deadlift and they go to unrack the bar and they're rounded the whole time peeling weight. So, at that point, it's like, what did you lift for? Like you're not even protecting your spine when it really matters. It's applying that strength to life. You see that a lot. You see people picking things up or in these hung positions where they're not applying those great principles that they just demonstrated when they lifted. What it really comes down to, what we're talking about, is form. And it doesn't matter if it's PR weight, if it's warm-up weight. You're mapping that plasticity. So those reps, it's training your brain to correlate good, healthy, proficient movement. And it's not the person that always comes in with, man, I just maxed my deadlift, but I threw my back out. It was, no, I sneezed and I was sitting in the car, or like I went to pick up my shoe real quick, and they come in and they're embarrassed. And it's like, well, it wasn't that one incident. There were multiple micro traumatic events that occurred, and they built up and built up and built up. And eventually your back was just like, we're done. We can't do this anymore. So, a lot of that is very, very common. And you hear it from people who are crazy embarrassed to come in and admit that, but you're okay. We just need to retrain. I mean, you're patterning the wrong way. Like you always have to make sure form is very relevant. Part
of the SOFLETE mission is to create durable, tactical athletes who can carry what they do in the gym out to their job. Just remembering that these movement patterns that you cultivate in the gym and all of that strength that you try and build, carry that stuff with you out to your job and make sure when you are performing these tasks, remain solid and keep good movement patterns so that you don't injure yourself on the job. That's why we're here.
Yeah, it is. That's what it's absolutely about. If you guys want more tips on how to reduce pain and improve your performance, you can visit my website, tvphysio.com, and grab a copy of my Always Ready manual.
Guys, we're going to have a link to that manual in the description. And this video is part of a series. If you like what you saw, please subscribe, hit like, hit the bell, and visit us at SOFLETE.com.